Hey everyone, in this episode we're discussing when is the appropriate time to talk to your children about addiction. Enjoy the show.
That was awesome.
Nailed it.
Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad, and also with me today, as you can see and hear, we have Benjamin B.
What's happening, everybody?
Listen, in today's episode, we're going to be discussing how and when is the proper time to have a conversation with your loved one or your children in particular about addiction, about alcoholism, and maybe when's too young, when is it too late, and those sorts of things. And I guess I'll just start off by saying I have two young children. I have a 3-year-old and I have a 1-year-old. And so obviously I haven't been put in a position yet to where I have to have these conversations with them, but that time is obviously coming, and I'm a little unsure as to how I'm going to go about it. Ben here, he obviously has.
So my son is 9 years old, and he's kind of at that age where he's starting to pick up and on things and learn about them from his friends at school, and whether, whatever topic it might be. But he's right at that point where I think I need to make a personal decision as a parent on how I'm going to handle that. Me being in recovery, my son already has picked up on that. He knows what I do for work. So maybe we're in a little bit different position. But I'm curious, and we wanted to have this discussion because, I'm not sure that there is a right or wrong answer. But Tom and I do have a lot of experience with working in treatment. And when somebody comes in, one of the first things we do is we do what's called a biopsychosocial. We do a pre-admission call. We get a lot of background information on family dynamic. And I think a lot of my own personal opinion and insight and the direction that I've kind of planned to take for my son is driven by what I've seen thus far. And I want to come out and say I don't think there's any right and wrong, but I figured the two of us could share our experience and maybe help parents come to their own conclusions. Obviously, every parent has to make the decision for themselves.
Yeah, so I think a good starting point is going to be, for Ben and I, we've come across this terminology, and it's kind of an acronym. It's the 3 C's. And the 3 C's is it's an acronym for 1, you can't control it, 2, you can't cure it, and also you didn't cause it. So I think a good starting point would be for us to kind of go through these points and to explain what our take is and what our perspective is on that. So for the first one, you can't control it. What does that mean to you?
Basically speaking, I think that the cause and the control part go really close together. I can set up a perfect environment for my son in this case, and regardless from what I've seen with others, let me just throw it out there like this. I've seen families come in, myself being in recovery, I came from a really good family. There was very little alcohol, there was no drugs in the house, yet I ended up being a drug addict and an alcoholic. And I've also seen I have family as well that come from alcoholic parents. My mother is the oldest of 11. My dad has 4 siblings. And alcoholism, drug addiction, it falls all over the place within the family tree. And, regardless, I have a cousin who came from a mother who used a lot of drugs and alcohol. And I see him have a beer like once in a blue moon. Like if we went out together, even in my drinking days, like 90% of the time he wouldn't even have a drink. I'd be like shocked if he did, and so that's the thing. Here he is. He was brought up around alcoholism. He doesn't do it. But on the other hand, we see families and clients that come in that come from an alcoholic family where it's rampant and it continues. So really coming back to your question, Tom, the cause it, control it part, it's it could come out of anywhere. I think what I'm going to start to look at is what direction am I planning to go with my son and why.
So when I think of people in the you can't control it part, that first C, right? I can't control it. For me, it means more of, I no matter how hard I try, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. And I think that's an easy thing for us, for Ben and I, to have an understanding of, because we deal with this day in and day out. But for you, it might be totally different, because obviously you might have a 15 or a 17 or a 20-year-old son or daughter, and you've never experienced this before. And I think human nature as parents is going to be, I can fix this, I can control this, and how am I going to control it? Well, maybe I'm gonna tighten down the reins, and they're not going to be able to leave the house. I'm going to take their car away from them. I'm not going to take them anywhere. Like, I'm basically going to imprison them in their home. And that's not something that you can do realistically you can do that, but it doesn't help the situation, because that was tried on me. And what did that ultimately do? I snuck out. I jumped out of my window. You know, I manipulated my way into being able to leave, and rather than coming home, I just wouldn't come home. And I was doing this at 16 years old. And it was because my dad in particular was trying to control this, and he was doing what he thought was the right thing. By controlling me, controlling my life, and controlling every action that I took, thinking that was going to prevent me from going out and smoking weed or drinking with my buddies or smoking cigarettes or whatever the case was. And it just drew me further away.
So now we're rolling. A lot of points keep coming to mind. I touched on a second ago that Weston is at the age where he's learning from the kids at school. And I think what we have to look at, and I didn't think of this previously, but we're in the age of social media. If we don't educate our kids, who is? Do I want Facebook? Do I want YouTube educating my kid? I mean, we see what's on TV these days, and I think with what Tom's saying, I can't control this thing, but my kid's going to do what he's going to do, like Tom said. But here's the thing. I believe maybe that I can assist my son in making an educated decision. I mean, if you relate this to when's it appropriate to have a talk with your kid about sex, can I keep him from doing it? No, but at least if he does, maybe he'll wear a condom, right? Like, give him a chance, to make an educated decision, so to speak. So that kind of be the direction that I'm starting to go with this thing.
Yeah, I think, and obviously with my son being 3, God willing, I have quite a few years before I have to do this personally, but I think I'm in a much better position knowing and going through what I've gone through, knowing that I'm not going to try and make every decision for him. And I think that's what a lot of parents do, just out of ignorance and not really understanding that doesn't work. Education is one thing, but trying to control and to make every decision for them, thinking that is the way to educate them, it's completely the wrong way to go.
I hold that opinion as well. I think it's done with good intentions. One of the patterns that I often see as well is for instance, let's refer to it as a sheltered home, so to speak. You try to shelter your son or daughter from harm and what the outside world is, but then I've seen people who come from a home where that's the case. There is no alcohol, there is no drugs, you're not allowed to watch rated R movies, etc. Then we get an individual that comes in, and part of their story is, I lived this sheltered life, and then I went to college. And it's like, boom, atom bomb, right? Like, look at everything I've been missing. Look at all the fun. Part of my own personal experience was, I came from a home where there wasn't a lot of drugs and alcohol. It was a healthy environment, but I almost felt like I was missing out on something. So kind of like Tom was saying with the sneaking out, I didn't really sneak out, so to speak, but I spent a lot of time away from home trying to look for what I didn't have at home. In my case, I was like, why don't my parents just learn to loosen up a little bit? Everybody else's family's normal. Here in high school, if my friend's mom lets us smoke pot on the back patio, why can't I do that in my house, Mom and Dad? And I kind of, not that my mom and dad did the wrong thing, by not being the parent that didn't allow that, but at the same time, like, you got to throw out the pros and cons. Like, maybe if I just sat on the patio at my parents' house and smoked a little pot, I would have had to been out on the town getting in trouble where I was exposed to more,
I think there's something to be said about exposure to these certain things. I'm not saying, light up a joint in front of your kids. That's not what I mean by exposure. Exposure through conversation. If it comes on the television, don't be so quick to turn it into some sort of taboo subject. You see a lot of people, and I like your analogy with the sex. You see a lot of people that grow up and sex is like this. It's this taboo thing, and you just don't do it. Like, sex is bad. And the next thing you know, people are acting out sexually because it was something that they grew up thinking it was so bad. They naturally wanted to figure out what this was all about. And next thing they're having sex and all these things. And that happens a lot. It happens with food too. I think food is another thing that, like, you turn something into a taboo, like sugar, for instance. And I was guilty of this with my son. I had this, I don't want him eating sugar, because if he eats sugar, then he's just going to go off the rails, and I don't ever want him experiencing what that's like. And I held that from him for a while. And it was probably about his first birthday. He attempted his first piece of cake. He had a smash cake, and he loved it, obviously. But then it was like, I noticed today, and I don't know if it's because of the way that I was in the past, but he like craves sugar now. And when sugar is around, he has to have it, and he gets super excited, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I want more, I want more, I want more." I don't know if that was because I made it such a taboo thing in the past. I don't know. More will be revealed. But you can't control it. Education, talk about it. Don't be afraid to bring it up. And I don't know that there's a specific age when it's a good time to start talking about it. I mean, your son is 9 years old, and I'm sure he's been exposed to it by now, and you've had the opportunity to have conversation with him.
Well, there's just so much, and going back to the social media aspect, I mean, we're in that age of Fortnite going on right now. And, I'm not a video game guy personally, but my son plays Fortnite. And some of the stuff that I can hear come through his headphones of the people he's playing with, I'm like, uh-oh. I better talk to him and let him know, like, what they're saying is not okay for him to say, etc. But going back to what Tom said a little bit earlier about the taboo part, I wanted to touch on scare tactics, so to speak. And I don't think that works either. And I've gained this off of my own personal experience as well, where I remember specifically being in third grade, and the first time that I had to attend a DARE or Just Say No programs. I remember we had after school care, and part of that was going to this DARE program. And for some reason, it sticks out in my mind specifically that we watched a video. I'll never forget this video. I don't know why it's ingrained, where a cartoon guy, young kid, was smoking some pot, and all of a sudden he had black X's in his eyes, and he keeled over and died from smoking a joint. And then, like, I get into middle school, right? And then I got friends that are smoking pot, maybe because their parents exposed them to it at home or something. I don't know. They stole a little out of dad's sock drawer, right? But all of a sudden I'm finding out, like, they're like, pot can't kill you. And then I'm thinking to myself, well, why are these people lying to me, right? I was made to think that you could overdose on marijuana. And from what we know today, that's just not possible. I did learn in school once how much you would have to do to literally overdose on pot, and it was like such an exorbitant amount. It's like humanly impossible to do. But the thing is here I was misled, and then I find out, like, oh, these people have been lying. And then the first time I smoked pot, it was awesome, right? And I had a good time, laughed a lot, and ate a ton of food, and it tasted better than ever. And I like to touch on that too, where, alcohol and drugs, being a person in recovery, it was not all bad times. Some of the best times in my life were had on alcohol and drugs. And I think for me and my son, it'd be kind of, I don't want to romanticize about it or, build it up in a way that would encourage him to try it. But being honest, like, hey, if you do this, you might have a good time. But the thing is know that could very possibly come with consequences. Legal consequences, physical consequences. Nowadays with the with the fentanyl on the streets, how do you know what you're getting? That's really come to fruition these days. You don't know what you're buying. They got the synthetic Xanax these days. Homemade Xanax. Who would have thought? But and that's the thing is, I totally drew a blank on where I was going with this. But anyway, point is I'm not going to try and scare my kid into thinking like it's going to be all bad, because it might not be. But are you willing to pay the consequences, not knowing what the consequences could be? And me being straightforward with him, my son knows what I do for work. He knows that I go to my 12-step meetings. I have sponsees come over the house on the weekends and do some step work with me and stuff. And, he's picked up on it and he understands.
He's been exposed.
Exactly.
He's been exposed to it. And that's one of the best things that I think that you're doing as his father, is exposing him to these things in a healthy manner, right? It's not like, oh, dad's leaving and doesn't know when he's coming back and he comes back all shot out. No, like, you're in the recovery process and your son is going to grow up knowing this is what my dad, this was a part of his life and this is how he deals with it, So I think the aspect that you're taking is a very good approach, and I would encourage anybody to take that same approach. Now,
I was going to say, I think for me, I don't really hide it, but if he asks questions, I answer those questions. Or if there's something obvious that I'm doing, maybe I'll take the time to explain it to him. It's gut feeling, really.
Sure. So let's move on to, let's say they've developed some sort of addiction. It's already, that they have some sort of addiction. I think one of the things, too, to understand is that you can't cure this for them. That's going to be the second C. You can't cure it. And we see so many times that parents think that, oh, I can do this. I can help them. I can cure this. I can cure them. And not only in drug addiction, but any facet. You see parents that we call them, and those of you, I'm sure, have heard of the helicopter parents. They're just up here, and they won't let their loved ones figure it out for themselves. And what does that ultimately do? It just draws them deeper and deeper and deeper into whatever it is. And for the purpose of this conversation, it's drug addiction. If they have it, you cannot cure it. And it's when you get to the point where you can figure that out and you can make that conscious decision that I can't cure them, it makes things a lot easier. So what's your thoughts on that?
The first thing that jumps to mind for me is that helicopter parents drive me nuts. For whatever reason, their son or daughter has ended up with addiction, and parents come in, and I have seen clients that are just irate with their parents. They don't want anything to do with them. I think a lot of that has to do with obviously internal stuff from the addict themselves, thinking that they failed, basically, and they've let their family down. Oh, I come from a good family. I don't understand why I am this way. I went through some of that myself, but at that point, it always comes back to, we talk about it on a lot of podcasts, let the professionals and the people with the experience handle the situations. We have it right now going on. There's a couple parents in particular that jump out right to mind that I could name them in 2 seconds. I'd be like, and their parents call me and call me and call me. How's my son doing? How's my daughter doing? How's my son doing? Any word on them? What's going on with them? If there's an emergency, we'll let you know. It's and very oftentimes it's hard for a parent. We get stuck in a odd spot in particular because a lot of the times the loved one, the parents help line this up for them, help get them into treatment. And it's really hard for me as a addictions counselor, as someone that works in the treatment field, to look at mom and dad and say, you got them here, but the fact of the matter is they don't want anything to do with you right now. And getting that message across it can be tough. It puts you in a tough spot, because they're like, well, if it wasn't for me, I got them there. So they need to make me part of this. And my encouragement to parents is, let other people handle it. There's a little bit less emotional attachment to the situation, and professionals have the ability to kind of step back and look at it as what the facts are and really break it down and dissect it as it should be, not from an emotional standpoint.
You see a lot of times we see a lot of times when people come in, especially young adults that have lived, say, their teenage lives, with parents that are very controlling, that want to make every decision for them, so on and so forth. They end up acting out in ways, and oftentimes that acting out involves drugs and alcohol. And when they get to us, it's like literally they just went to college, and it's like freedom. Like I've spent the past 5, 10, 15 years with my parents. They drive me crazy. They won't let me make a decision for myself. The only way that I could even deal with them is by getting messed up every day. Not obviously, that's placing the blame on the parents, and we don't want to do that. But that's what people think, and that's what they say when they come in here. And so that's why we encourage parents and loved ones all the time, is to take a back seat. When they come in, you stay as uninvolved with this process until we invite you to come into the process. And that's a very hard thing for parents to comprehend because of what Ben said just a second ago. They spent a lot of money financially, right? They spent, thousands of dollars to get their loved one, son or daughter, some help. You would think that they essentially bought their way into being able to be part of this process, and arguably so. And then you also see like they jump through hoops to try and get their loved ones into treatment, and it doesn't go without saying like their efforts are definitely there. But being able to understand that just because you go through that doesn't mean that you have the right to be involved through the whole entire process. We want you to be, whenever it's beneficial to the client, when it's beneficial to the client. Because what happens a lot is the parents, they hover over everything. They need to know every decision that's being made. Why haven't I been communicated with? I paid thousands of dollars. Why don't I know what's going on? Well, maybe they don't want you to know because they've spent the last 10 years of their life with you knowing everything about them, and this is finally that one opportunity that they have to not involve you. And being able to humble yourself enough to say, you know what, we're going to let the professionals do this, and we're not going to get involved, and tell your aunts, uncles, whoever else wants to be involved in this whole process. This is about them. It's not about us. And being able to do that is going to help that's going to help them heal a lot faster.
What's funny is you mentioned let the professionals do their job. I've also had a couple experiences where people that are qualified professionals in what we do, whether they be medical doctors, addiction specialists themselves, who have come in, they send their loved one to the treatment center, and then they get involved and they're trying to tell us like what medication their kid needs to be on, and then they're having sidebar conversations with their son or daughter over the phone. Well, what did they put you on, and what are they doing with you for this therapy, and are they doing CBT, are they doing psychodrama, are they doing experiential therapy? Well, EMDR, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. If they don't have you doing this, then you need to talk to them, or I'm going to call them and I'm going to let them know. I'm like, whoa, I understand that you have some credentials yourself, mom or dad, but at the same time, keep in mind, like, you also have that emotional involvement, and while your intentions are probably very good, and while you're probably very educated on the topic, it is an important time to take that step back too. And there was one other thing I wanted to talk about too. I wanted to make sure we touched on all the pros and cons, so that, obviously parents have to make their own educated decision on how they're going to, expose their son or daughter to this stuff. I just want to throw it out there as being a 12-step guy too. It's pretty common once in a while, not too common, I should say, but you get an individual who brings their son or daughter to every single 12-step meeting that they go to. I understand from the alcoholic or addict's point of view wanting to get their, go to a meeting no matter what kind of thing. But with that being said, like, I don't know if I fully agree with exposing your son or daughter to that extent. Like, I've met clients who have said, I grew up in whatever Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, whatever Anonymous that it is, but they say that they've been going to meetings since they were 7, 8 years old because their parents brought them.
They grew up in the rooms.
That's scary too, isn't it?
I don't agree with it. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, unless you're if you're a single parent that you have no other options and you need to go to a meeting, absolutely, then, do what you got to do. But if you have the option to let them go to the playground or something, have your mom or dad or whoever, if you have assistance and they can go somewhere else, by all means. I'd much rather have my kid doing something in that hour than sitting in there listening to a bunch of people complain.
Yeah, and again, I do understand, it's you get to a meeting however you can, and there's some single mothers out there, single fathers, but for time's sake, I think we could keep going back and forth, but
there's the last C we got to cover, man. It's the cause. You didn't cause it. We have to cover this real quick. Listen, addiction is addiction. It happens, and you can't control it. You can't cure it, and you didn't cause it. Like, there's a lot of people, parents, they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm the reason for all this, and they'll internalize it. And then, that in itself can make for a disaster of everything, because now they feel like they have to fix it, so because I caused it, now I have to be the one to fix it, and that can be detrimental too, because it could otherwise make you do things for your addict son or daughter that you wouldn't otherwise do. And I actually covered this in a topic, the addict manipulation. This is part of that, A lot of times addicts will make you feel like you caused their addiction, and then when you feel like you caused it, you're more prone to want to fix it or do things for them to make up for their addiction. We see that a lot. It's very unfortunate. Yeah. So understand that you didn't cause this. When you can get to that understanding and know that you didn't cause it, that this is something that they brought on themselves, and they can get through it themselves. Obviously, you could be there as love and support and to help them to a certain degree, but you didn't cause it. I don't have anything more on that.
Yeah, I would just say, in a nutshell, to come back to what we would launch this for anyway, when it comes to me and my son, I'm going to do my best to give some exposure to my son, not overkill it on the exposure. If he has questions or curiosities, to be honest about it. I'm going to talk about my personal experiences with it, and put my kid in a spot where he can make educated decisions, because whatever decision he's going to make no matter what I do, but at least I can feel confident that he's making it with some basis and understanding that there could be consequences, or if he chooses to partake in alcohol and drugs or sex or whatever, that he does it in order for the consequences to be lessened, minimal.
All right, that is it. realrecoverytalk.com/conversation. Go there and get your PDF file to learn how to have a conversation with your loved one. It's definitely going to be difficult, but all you have to do is go there. We have a PDF file that we created. You can download that PDF file, and it will help and walk you through that process. And if you are on YouTube watching this, subscribe, share this episode with whoever needs to see it. This is what we're doing this for. We want to get this message out to everybody. And until then, we will see y'all later.